Hello, my name's David Seaman, and this is the Three Lions Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Three Lions Podcast. My name is Russell Osborne, and this is an independent England football supporters podcast. I hope I find you well. Welcome along if you're a new listener, and equally hello to those of you that regularly tune in. Your company always appreciated, however you listen. Hope you enjoyed the recent episodes that have come your way, the most recent being the Lionesses preview. Of course, they had a couple of games against Italy and Spain recently. Now, at the time of recording, they had drawn the Italy game, somewhat disappointingly. And they will have played their game against Spain at Wembley. Now, for those of you that follow the team, you'll probably know the result of that by now. Here's hoping it was a positive one. This episode, though, I have a chat with an author who has written a book about one of our most currently gifted players. I'm sure you've seen the title of the episode, so you'll know who I mean. We'll get to that in a moment. But first, I just wanted to mention the recent matches, or the recent announcement of matches from the FA. Basically, confirmation of the rumours that were going around. On the 10th of June, a few days after we've played Andorra, we have a home friendly fixture against Senegal. This is being played at Nottingham Forest's City Ground. It's a fixture that has caused a lot of talk about tickets, and that is because the City Ground holds, I think it's just over 30,000, and it's been well documented that the Supporters Travel Club has a similar amount of members. Whilst I very much doubt that all the members will want to go, or be able to, as there has to be an allocation for officials, sponsors, an away allocation. But you can see that tickets will be very much in demand. The last time we had a home game in a similar sized venue, I guess, it was probably when we played Hungary at Wolves in 2022. I don't remember similar concerns back then, but then again, the amount of travel club members maybe wasn't what it is now. So Senegal it will be for that game, a team that we've only played once before. I'm sure many of you won't need reminding when that was. For those of you that do, was of course the Qatar World Cup, when we faced them there it was the knockout period, wasn't it, when we won 3-0. But the last time we played at the City Ground was back in 1909, when we faced Wales in a home international. And speaking of Wales, the other fixture announced was against our near neighbours on Thursday the 9th of October. This one is at Wembley and will be the 105th meeting between the two sides. From a personal point of view, it's a shame that it's not away. I missed the last away Wales game back in 2011. That was the European Championships qualifier. It's one of those away games that I'd like to tick off. Of course, we have, though, since played them in the Euros of 2016 and the World Cup. Once again, we mention it, of 2022. Ticket details for both of those, I'm sure, will come at some stage soon. Just keep a lookout on the FA's England website. Now, I'm sure you are a follower of the show on social media, be it on any one of the usual places, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. If you're not, you can do. Just search Three Lions Podcast. Actually, I mentioned YouTube there. I had a bit of time on my hands recently as it was school half term. And whilst I was supposed to be entertaining my daughter, In reality, I actually ended up uploading various clips to the Three Lions podcast channel where I've appeared on the telly. A little self-indulgent, maybe. I don't know. But if you are interested in seeing those, and one where I was on Sky News the day before the recent Euro final, head over there. Let me also mention the Ko-fi account. Should you want to contribute to the hosting of the show, you can do that. Basically, I pay the hosting company to push this podcast out to all the places where you listen to your podcasts. It's not a huge amount, and I pay it because I enjoy doing it. But if you want to contribute, you are more than welcome. Any amount is gratefully received. Just head to kofi.com/Three Lions podcast. ko-fi.com/Three Lions podcast. Okay, who's up for a chat about an England superstar? It's my pleasure to welcome to the Three Lions podcast, Graeme Croser. He is author of many a sports article, but now a published author in book form. Hey Jude, The Rise and Rise of Jude Bellingham was released in November of last year. In the nicest possible way, it is a real easy read. Really enjoyed it. Graeme, welcome along.
Hey Russell, thanks for having me on.
Oh, welcome aboard. Great book, Jude Bellingham. How did this all come about?
Right, I'm going to have to make a confession right off the bat that this is a little bit of a happy accident. I was speaking to a publisher about something entirely different, completely different genre. I'd written a book on a band that I follow, and I was trying to get that published. I was in dialogue with the publishers, and they suggested that I write a sports book for them.
Okay.
They had the concept ready to go. They wanted a book on Bellingham. I think they saw a gap in the market to tell Jude's story from the bottom up, if you like. And they asked if I would be interested in doing it. I had recently been made redundant from my job and a lot of time in my hands, and I was looking for a project, and my eyes, as you can imagine, lit up at the prospect of doing this. So the one catch was they said it needed to be completed within 4 months, which is quite a tight turnaround for a book. But listen, I was up for the challenge and just get stuck in, and it was an absolutely fabulous adventure.
So what's the thought process when you've got like 4 months to get a book out? Where on Jude Bellingham, where do you start? Because having read it, obviously it covers his whole career to date. What was your first thing? Because I know you built up quite a relationship with his Real Madrid's manager, Carlo Ancelotti, his son, David Ancelotti.
Davide, yes. Davide, that was, if you like, that was really the kind of key interview, if you like, in the book. That came a little bit later. Right. Once I'd started to kind of plan out a kind of loose structure, because you never quite know how the story's going to unfold, where it's going to take you. But obviously, there was a lot of source material out there in Jude. A lot of articles obviously have been written on him, a lot of podcasts, a lot of TV and online footage and YouTube, etc. So there was plenty of source material to go on. But that's the thing. I don't know about you, but I've read a lot of sports biographies in my time, and a lot of them just feel like that, like a kind of cut and paste, a gluing together of all the material that's already out there. And, they can be brilliantly written, etc. But I wanted to provide something, if I could, that provided a little, or a lot of fresh insight, if I could, So that, to me, meant going to Birmingham, going to Dortmund, if I could, getting out to Madrid, trying to see games, trying to talk to people that had played with Jude, worked with him. And in the case of going down to Birmingham, just walking the streets he grew up on, go to Stourbridge, go to Hagley, see the environment where he was kind of forged, I started taking notes, who do I know? What would my contacts book allow me to do here? Who could open doors for me? Who could potentially get me some introductions? And I did remember that, a contact of mine up here had recently been on his UEFA Pro Licence course down in Wales, and he had established a friendship with Davide Ancelotti in that course, and he'd spoken about him fondly, about the rapport he had with him. And so I invited said contact out for breakfast one morning and told him about what I was doing. And he says, I know somebody at Madrid. I'm like, yes, I do. That's why you're sitting here. He's like, I'll make an introduction. And at that point, you don't know. It's, is he going to go for it? Is he not? And he did. I spoke to him on the phone a few days later, Davide. And he basically agreed to sit and talk to me. And although Madrid themselves, a club, can be really awkward, and, they're monolithic, aren't they? It's
absolutely,
their media operations, very strictly controlled. And, they were not going to cooperate in terms of granting me official access to press conferences or to interview players or anything. But having that personal in with Davide allowed me to get my foot in the door and find out, a little bit about the context behind his first season over there. So, when I knew that was going to happen, it lit the whole thing up and, really gave me some extra motivation as well to get all the other work done, knowing that, I was going to get out to Madrid and get a proper insight into the here and now.
Yeah. Well, he's as close, I guess, as you're really going to get. We're talking the day after Real Madrid put Manchester City out of the Champions League, and I'm watching it last night, and they scan across the Madrid bench, and I did notice him at points. I'm thinking, there he is. That's as close as you are. I think he's technical director, isn't he? Is his official title?
Unless it's changed. He was certainly assistant coach. Okay. Effectively, he's operated as assistant manager to Carlo. And he's a bridge as well, just generationally. I mean, Davide's only in his mid-30s, so I think he's quite relatable with the players. And I think a lot of the workload as well on the training ground gets passed on to him. So he certainly wants to be a manager in his own right at some point. It would not amaze me to see him, if the stars align properly for him. I think he would love a crack at England at some point, coming in the English game. The two of them have already worked together at Everton. For example. So I mean, he very much explained, the genesis of the transfer, like all transfers at Real Madrid, doesn't really have anything to do with the manager. There's a committee, he will be consulted and he will offer an opinion, but Florentino Perez and, there's I think there's four of them in this kind of management committee who make these decisions. They go out and they plan ahead and they source players, particularly young players, for the future. And Ancelotti was told, you are getting Bellingham next year. And I think Carlo's response to that was, I'd quite like Harry Kane. Benzema's leaving. We need a striker.
Yeah.
You're getting Bellingham. Okay. So, and that was a problem they had to solve. And, as Davide said, they sat down with Jude very early on and said, look, we've got a problem. You might be able to help us with the solution. What do you think? Now, bearing in mind, Bellingham's 19, turning 20 at this point. Just signing for Real Madrid, just joining a club like that, would involve some level of adaptation for anybody going there. Never mind being asked to do it and play out of position at the same time. But immediately he just said, yep, what do you want me to do? I'll do it.
Wow. Was
up for it. He's been a box-to-box midfielder, if you like, for most of his development at Birmingham and Dortmund. And Madrid wanted him to tweak that slightly and basically play as a false nine, certainly in the initial part of the season, to fill that gap. It helps, I suppose, when you've got Vinicius on one side, Rodrigo on the other, and you've got Valverde and Toni Kroos slotting balls through. It's not a hardship as such, but it's still, there's a lot of pressure on the boy's shoulders, and I think that's the special thing about Bellingham. Is, never mind anything else he's done, to go to Madrid, throw his shoulders back like that and strut around in his first season and perform at that level and have that level of impact is incredible. And players previously have gone there, as Zidane's and even Ronaldo's and stuff in the past, have not had that kind of instant impact. He went there and did it straight off the bat at 20. It's incredible.
Yeah, well, I think it's important that you mention his age, because I think the vast majority of us forget actually how old, how young he actually is. He's 21. He's already accrued 40 England caps. He's played in 2 Euros. He's played in a World Cup. He was born 2003. Manchester United had just won the Premier League. AC Milan, the Champions League. I looked up the next England game that was played shortly after he was born was when we played Slovakia at Middlesbrough. It's like he's been around for so long, yet he's so young. And I think it is really important to take into account his age when you read through the book and get to the very last chapter, which maybe we'll come to. But yeah, it's amazing that he's just 21 and he owns the Bernabeu, doesn't he?
Yeah, and that was, again, I talked earlier about I needed to get out there and be on the ground. One of the striking things, and there is a photograph I took that's in the book, then the quantity of number 5 shirts around the stadium on match day and on the day before, just people milling around doing stadium tours, etc. It was phenomenal. You have got superstars at that club, Luka Modric and Vinicius. You've now have Mbappe, so it's maybe changed slightly since then, but last season when I visited, it was around about May time, April, start of May. It was the Jude show. That's people, everybody queuing up to get their names and numbers printed in their jerseys. It was Jude they wanted. And he did go in there and make that instant impact and become, but I suppose there's a charisma about him as well. And I think you can trace that back to Birmingham because he debuted at Birmingham as well at 16. And again, maybe in the first few weeks and months, there was a little element of the manager just kind of feeding him in a little bit and just trying not to use him, too much. But, by the end of the season, he was the main man in that team. He was taking responsibility, and you could see it in the final interview. If anybody wants to go and have a look, if you haven't already done so, there's a final interview he gave after Birmingham's final game of that season. And he knew he was leaving. The club had underachieved, as they had been for a number of years, but he's distraught. Not so much that he's leaving, that's part of it, it's in the mix, but he's distraught that he couldn't make it better.
Yeah.
That he wasn't able to make this team better and score more goals and get them higher up the league and, doing the things that he believed he should. And, he's saying this isn't good enough and we've got to be better than this. And he's almost in tears, That's at 60. He's a young player in that dressing room, basically taking the whole responsibility for the thing on his shoulders. It's incredible. And I think when people talk a little bit, and we'll probably touch on this at some point as well, about, he got a red card last week against Osasuna. It's not the first time it's happened in Madrid. It happened previously in Dortmund as well, where he can get overly emotional on the pitch. But I suspect that's all driven just from a sense of constantly aspiring to be the absolute best at all times. He's driven by it. Again, at the end of the final in the Euros, after the game against Spain, he's a whirl of rage almost. It's not directed at anyone. It's directed at himself as much as anything,
His own personal goals, isn't it? Yeah,
he's super driven. I'm not sure. Is that something he was born with? Is it a product of his environment? I try and touch on that in the book. I don't pretend to know the answers to that, but I certainly float the questions and try and explain, how he was brought up and the environment he grew up in, etc., and the coaches he worked under early doors as well. But there is something, people use this word, and I don't like it because there are a lot of touchstones that people use that talk about generational talents or something. There is something special about him that transcends his football ability. It's his character as well.
Yeah. I think just going back to Birmingham, I think I'm probably a typical example of a supporter at the time who you'd hear this name Bellingham being floated around and maybe not taking so much notice of Birmingham and not being a fan of the team. And then you hear, he's moving to Dortmund. And then you hear of Birmingham are retiring his shirt. And you think, hang on a minute, who retires a shirt for a child, basically, for a teenager? And it was then that you think, well, hang on a minute, I should be taking a little bit more interest in him, trying to cast my mind back. And obviously he goes to Dortmund. It's a phenomenal development. And you mentioned about sort of his upbringing. It's clear that his parents have got a massive influence on how he grew up and being the person he is. It's for him to go to Dortmund at such a young age as well was probably a really good thing, because had he have moved to like a Premier League club, the pressure probably would have been immense, I guess.
It would, yeah. And I think that's why they made the decision. However, I mean, in so many other ways, it would have been the easy thing to do.
Yeah.
You know, Man United were particularly hot for him, if you like. You know, Solskjaer met with him. That's pretty well documented.
Yeah.
You know, rolled out the red carpet for him. Sir Alex was there. And I think Cantona showed up and all the rest of it to give him the full welcoming committee. And, you know, he could have just moved up the road, had all the trappings of being a Premier League player, gone home to his family, and it could have been a lot simpler to move to Germany at that point. And let's not forget the other factor here is we were in lockdown.
Yes, yeah.
So he's moved to a new country where the adaptation process it's not going to be seamless, you know, from a social point of view. And I don't mean that going out with your teammates and having a beer or whatever, but in every level, you can't operate as a normal human being at that point. You're going to be living in a strange environment under pretty serious conditions, you know, and you're playing in front of empty stadiums and protocols around training grounds. It's hard enough being at home dealing with all that to move to another country in a different language, etc. At that point, I think that took guts, you know, and I think from his family, you know, the commitment from the family at that point as well. I mean, effectively, the family almost split in half at that point, and it's kind of remained the same. The father, Mark, is with Job at Sunderland at the moment, and Denise, the mother, went with Jude to Dortmund and then to Madrid as well. And, you know, that support network's been important, but the sacrifices they've had to make along the way as well, you know, are pretty significant. Albeit, of course, the financial compensation they're making is huge at the same time. But, you know, you're talking about your life being uprooted here. You know, it's no small thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, just thinking back to that time, what I was doing, homeschooling, and all that sort of thing. And there he is sort of taking on a whole new world. It's really unbelievable to think about, but he became a success at Dortmund. Didn't he? 3 seasons there. I think he was top scorer in his final season there, wasn't he?
Yeah, and think about that. So you discussed his age earlier. He's in midway through, getting into the business end of his second season at Real Madrid at the moment. Prior to that, he played 3 full seasons at Dortmund, and prior to that, a full season at Birmingham, and he's still only 21.
Oh, no.
So let's put all that in context as well. But yeah, he went to Dortmund the first year. You know, he won the cup in his first season, and he's spoken about that, his regret about winning that cup, but again, in an empty cavern of a stadium, you know. And then in the final season, they went right to the last day for the title and lost it. So I think, again, he left Dortmund, not in a huff or anything, but really frustrated that he didn't achieve more while he was there. But in terms of game development and, you know, he became so coveted. He was already coveted. All the big clubs in England wanted him before he went to Germany, but by the time he left, although I think everybody kind of given up. I think Liverpool would have been the ones who really, really wanted him.
Okay.
Really, really wanted to sign Bellingham. But, you know, Madrid made sure they were in pole position to do that deal. I think it's at Juni Califat, who I think is the chief scout. I need to call that up, but I think he is. You know, they'd established a link to the Bellinghams quite early. And as I said to you earlier, you know, Carlo Ancelotti had been told, you're going to have Bellingham next season. You know, that's then the club had planned early. So he knew he was going in advance of that. And probably that drove him to think, I want to go out with a title. And he was injured for the last day and couldn't play as well. He was named in the bench, but, you know, his knee wasn't quite up to it. So I think that was a source of a lingering frustration. But yeah, going over to Dortmund and speaking to people around the place, yeah, and they kind of knew, I think, fairly early on that it would be a stepping stone for him. Certainly when I was growing up, Dortmund were European champions in 97 and were seen very much as one of the big guns, the elite, and had World Cup winners in their team, etc. But, you know, the orders changed a little bit, and it's quite sad in some ways that Dortmund now themselves regard themselves and market themselves as 2 players as a feeder club. You know, Erling Haaland, come here and get a couple of years and then we'll sell you on to a Man City or whatever, but don't go straight away. Come here first and learn your trade. Similarly with Bellingham and others. So it was the right environment for him, and he was guaranteed to play. That's the other thing, in front of a passionate crowd. And, you know, that made him, rounded him into the player that could go to Madrid and make that instant impact.
Well, it was at this time that you say about all the Premier League clubs are sniffing around and taking an interest. But in all this time, the FA in England had been fully aware of his progress, and he makes his debut during those COVID times. It's frustrating when I think back that it was a game that I wasn't at, and very few people were there at Wembley in his debut against Ireland. But he then began to progress through the ranks at England, and probably one of the main beneficiaries of the COVID times was the fact that the Euros was put back a year, that he was able to become part of that squad. And even so young back then, he made 3 appearances in that tournament. Yeah.
Yeah. And within less than 18 months, he's then playing at a World Cup, you know, and you see even the progression in that time from, you know, because that Euros, you know, I think it was 3 substitute appearances, wasn't it? He was still getting on the pitch, so he'd earned that to that point. But, you know, you saw in Qatar, you know, how important he was and how integral he was going to be for Gareth Southgate at that point, you know. I mean, 40 caps at 21, it's incredible. I mean, the pathway, if you like, the traditional pathway that's set out is that players come through 18s, 19s, 21s, then you go into the first team. So he's at the age now where he should be making his debut.
Yes.
Instead, you get 3 major tournaments and 40 caps and 6 goals and all the rest of it, and tantrums at the end of a major final after not winning it. You know, it's incredible.
Yeah, just thinking back to that goal against Iran, wasn't it? And he scores. That was the opening goal for England in the World Cup there in Qatar. And sort of then he sort of is displaying this celebration that we all are now fully aware of, where he just arms outstretched, feet planted on the floor, and he's just looking into the crowd wherever he goes when he's scored, isn't he? It's iconic now.
Yes, I mean, it's funny you should mention that, because the first time I saw Jude Bellingham playing, this predated any involvement with the book, was at Hampden for that international, anniversary friendly of the first international game, the 150th, Scotland v England.
The 3-1 England win, that was.
3-1 England win, yes, I know. And of course, Scotland come into that game thinking, oh, you know, we're up for it. We're not always sure if England's motivation going into that game is quite on a par with ours.
Yeah.
That night, to me, it looked like it was. I think England were on it, they were at it, and they were very impressive. And at the middle of that was a strutting Jude Bellingham. You know, he was just immense. A few of us spoke after the game about that, about just how, you know, and how different the level was between Bellingham, just about every other player on the pitch, and I include a lot of the England players in that as well. You know, he seemed to be operating on a different plane. But that celebration, of course, he scored that night.
Yeah.
And over he went towards the England fans, planted his feet, arms back, and you watched that and you thought, okay, yeah, this guy fancies himself, but with good reason, you know?
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
You know, he backs that up, doesn't he? That's
absolutely.
The thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Good night, that one. Thanks for reminding me. But of course, then we've mentioned that Real Madrid came along and he's making the transfer to them for, was it about 88 million? And like you say, that first season, he dominates La Liga. He's scoring last minute winners against Barcelona as well. And he's winning the Champions League, isn't he? He's winning trophies that people can only dream of at his age or in their career.
Yeah. I mean, again, I touched on earlier about he was asked to fulfill a slightly different position, but you wouldn't have known it. And the way he was, I think his first game was at Bilbao and he scored a bit of a sclaffy finish, but then it went, he does the celebration in front of a braying home end. You know, he showed no apprehension at all. No apprehension whatsoever. And he thrived in that challenge and got better. Now, remember, you mentioned the fact the previous year he'd scored a number of goals for Dortmund, but you still wouldn't call him prolific. You know, he was would you call him an attacking midfielder? I suppose you would. He would probably, he always says the reason he had the number 22 jersey was because a coach said to him when he was younger, I want you to be everything. I want you to be a 4. I want you to be an 8 and a 10. Add the numbers up 22. That's your squad number. He wanted to do everything, but he's very much did and still does, I think, see himself as he wants to be the complete midfield player. The goals are a part of that, but it's not essential. What he was doing at the start of last season for Real Madrid was performing like a high level number 9. You know, these were Harry Kane numbers. They were almost Erling Haaland numbers, you know. And the types of goals he was arriving and scoring, it was little first-time finishes at the far post and head flicks. And, you know, it wasn't all arriving late as a midfielder might. You know, it was proper striking play in many instances, you know. So he added that to his game again in the most intense environment you could imagine. Get into Real Madrid team. And the rate at which he was scoring was incredible. I mean, Madrid, the season before, obviously, Man City battered them in the Champions League. They had one of those seasons where you're starting to look at the manager, and the manager himself's looking at it thinking, you don't last long performing like this, you know? And I think Carlo himself probably thought at that point, you know, unless we do something spectacular at the start of this season, i.e. last season, you know, the president, Perez, is going to get itchy feet.
Yeah.
You saw, I mean, it's happened this season as well when they're actually doing pretty well. And he's won the league and the Champions League last season. There was talk about Ancelotti losing his job in the autumn. You know, that's how quickly it changes at Madrid. That's how fickle it is.
Yeah.
But the way Bellingham went in and filled those shoes of Benzema, scored all of those goals, you could make a case and say that he helped Ancelotti stay in his job a bit longer. You know, that it could be as big and as important as that. The goals tailed off towards the end of the season, but, you know, he was still so important. But I think, and you said we were going to touch, we definitely should touch on this. You know, there is an element of the workload that's been placed on this guy's shoulders. Yeah. It may be unprecedented. It's a big word, but I'm not sure players have played a lot of games, but to play at the intensity he has, under the scrutiny he has, with as little downtime as he has, you know, it's all been squashed. Even looking at that World Cup coming in mid-season, etc. You know, have we seen that before? I'm not sure. Can he sustain it? Time will tell.
Yeah.
And you saw at the Euros there was certainly a tapering off in his performances, which is kind of what I was coming around to saying earlier. You know, by the end of the season, you know, he did look exhausted. There were signs during games, although he wants to be perpetual motion and covering every blade of grass. There were moments in games where he would take a break and lean against a goalpost or something and, you know, compose himself so that he could go again. But it was taking its toll, you know, and I think that's the thing we probably do have to be a little bit mindful of going forward. That, you know, can anybody sustain this relentless level of performance in that position in the pitch, the way he plays the game?
Yeah. No, there's a lot of stats around football these days. A lot of them I find irrelevant, but as I read that chapter in your book and you're comparing it to the minutes that the likes of Michael Owen or Wayne Rooney were playing at Jude Bellingham's current age or their progression to his current age, then I really did think actually it could be a concern. But as you say, if he is a once in a generational talent, sports science now, you can look after players a lot better and he appears to look after himself the best he can, then maybe he's going to just fulfill all our dreams, really. But I don't want to sort of throw cold water over the coals. There is another side to him, though, isn't there? You don't want to be on the end of his tongue. I've seen, like, watching on the telly, but I think that's just his passion, isn't it? And the fact that he wants to win and he's not scared to speak out.
Yeah, I think you saw that with again, I've been very topical here. Last weekend against Osasuna, he got his red. And of course, he used bad language. The context of that, who it was aimed at, is another thing. But very clearly, you can see him mouthing the words to the referee, I am talking to you with respect. That's very much a product of his upbringing. I think, by all accounts, anybody I spoke to who's encountered and worked with him, dealt with him, etc., speaks to this about how unfailingly polite he is with people. you know, how you conduct yourself in your daily life and go about your business and how you treat your seniors and people in authorities. It's important to him. But that's not to say he doesn't, you know, that other thing he's got, the volcano inside him, that sense of injustice that's constantly burning away. I may add as well, not helped by Real Madrid's current complex and war with the authorities in Spain where they think everybody's out to get them. Must be one of the worst conspiracy jobs in history, given what Real Madrid consistently win year after year. But, you know, they are very publicly stating that they feel they're hard done by officials, etc. That must be feeding into dressing room talk as well, you know, and going through the club. And if you throw that into the mix with somebody like Bellingham, who almost, I don't know whether he feels destined to achieve great things or whatever, but anything that he perceives has been put in his road, whether it's just a mistake from a referee or whatever, he's railing against it, you know, it frustrates him and it comes out. But I mean, that's all part of the package. I don't think you would want to take that far away from him.
No, nothing whatsoever. In the time that we've got left, the one question that you bring up occasionally in the book, and is something that I do wonder, can he be England captain? And we're not far away from Thomas Tuchel's first squad.
Oh, can he be England captain? Of course he can. And he will be.
Yeah.
Not now, though. And obviously there is an incumbent, so it's not a question for right now, I don't think. But yeah, he's still young. So let's remember that he is 21. I think Jude Bellingham isn't going anywhere. He's going to be integral to the England team for, you know, fitness permitting and all the things we've discussed there about burnout, etc. All of that permitting, Jude Bellingham will probably be in that England team for another 10 years. He could he should break the caps record if he does that, you know.
Peter Shilton, watch out.
Yeah. He is a leader.
Yeah.
So all of that said, you think he's an automatic choice. But I think the England dimension, and you saw it in the summer as well, there's something else there. There's something. And this is why he was wise to go to Dortmund and why it's good probably that he's at Real Madrid at the moment, etc. I wonder if he was playing for a Liverpool or a Manchester United just now with that level of scrutiny and whether it would have a detrimental effect on him, whether he would be getting even angrier, if he would be getting even more frustrated. And, you know, he's left alone to a degree over there. He's out of the spotlight. He's in a spotlight and it's fierce enough, but it's not relevant to him. It's not where he's from, you know? And I think that the tabloid press dimension, I mean, is that moving away because of the internet and stuff? I don't know. I think we are in different times from when David Beckham was doing it. Yeah. You don't have paparazzi and stuff chasing you down the street, but you do social media, and that can be even more invasive in some ways. But he's out of that England environment over there. If he became England captain, would that bring an extra layer of... Yeah, it would, yeah. And I think he will be. He probably could handle it just now, but I don't think there's any need to make him captain just now. I think that's kind of what's it, you know. But he will be, you know, maybe when he's 25 or something like that, or just a little bit older. You know, let him play. He's still going to be a leader. You're not going to lose anything by not making him captain. Yeah.
I mean, I'm in danger of putting far too much additional pressure on his shoulders, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you saw in the summer with Harry Kane. You know, Kane was playing fine at the Euro. He wasn't as explosive as maybe he has been in the past, but the team wasn't. You know, the function of the team wasn't doing that. So, and again, he's coming off the end of a long season, etc. But he goes straight back out to Munich and starts scoring every week again. You know, it's not like he's tapered off, but there seemed to be an extra load in Harry Kane over the summer, I think, that wasn't necessarily helpful, and Jude might not benefit from that at the moment. But yeah, I mean, is he England captain? Yeah, of course. You'd want him in the trenches with you, wouldn't you?
Absolutely.
You know, you'd want him getting into battle because you know he's going to leave it all out there. He can be temperamental, but I don't think he's the sort you would ever see throwing a sulk during a game and disappearing, you know? I think if he's going to have a bad game, he's going to have a really bad game because he's still going to go looking for the ball, you know?
Yeah. It's a great book. I can highly recommend it. It's released through Arena Sports. Where's the best place to pick up a copy?
You should be able to pick it up in most major bookstores. I was down in London a few weeks ago, and it was in Watson's in Piccadilly, which was lovely to see.
I bet.
As a newly published author, places like Foyles, etc. I'm sure you can get it on Amazon, etc. And the publisher themselves have a store at Arena Sports. So yeah, it should be widely available, and yeah, and anybody fancies a read.
Yeah, nice, great book. And can anyone follow you on social media? Is that something you want to put out there? Yeah,
sure. I'm on X. At Graeme Croser. you should be able to find me on Instagram, GF Croser. So yeah, I'm out there. I'm not a prolific poster, but that may change as time goes on. So,
and what's next? You mentioned a book about a band. What is that on the horizon? Who was that potentially about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a longer. That was my lockdown project. I started that around about then. I kind of an alternative rock band. Basically, they came out of Edinburgh, I suppose. Scottish band called Goodbye, Mr. Mackenzie, who produced some wonderfully weird and dark music, but had some pop hits as well in the 80s, get into the 90s. And a certain Shirley Manson was a member of the band as well.
Okay.
Before she was poached and went on to success with Garbage. So it's their story. Shirley was in the band for 10, 11 years. So
really?
It's a proper backstory for her, but, they cross paths with, Nirvana are in there, Talking Heads are in there. Debbie Harry, he went out on tour with her. They recorded in Hansa Studios in Berlin when the wall came down. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and U2 were out there at the time. They recorded with Queen's producer Mac in Munich, their debut record. There's a lot of stuff in there, and it's a story that hasn't been told properly, and their music's probably underappreciated. And I want to tell that story. I want to get it out there, and hopefully this year that will appear as well. So Goodbye, Mr. Mackenzie. Watch out for it.
We'll watch out for it. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people interested. Graeme, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciated. Yeah, let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. Delighted to be on, and thanks for having me.
Thank you to Graeme for his time there. Really enjoyed it. So much more that we could have covered, be it Jude's maturity in front of the camera in his interviews. We could have mentioned his brother Job more on his parents maybe. But basically that's all in the book, so you can search that out at your leisure. And I wish Graeme all the very best with it. I should also say thank you to Tom at the FSA and Free Lions for connecting us together. Now, I know this is an England podcast, and whilst we did cover England, I think it was important we spoke about Birmingham and Dortmund and Madrid. One thing that we didn't mention was that Jude is the 6th Englishman to play for Madrid. Now, there's no prize, but can you name the previous 5? Once again, the answer, well, that can be found in the book. And whilst it's a little out of my hands, I have been a go-between between Block 109, Graeme, and the publishers of the book, Arena Sports Publishing, about the possibilities of getting a copy for Block 109's monthly draw. So keep tabs on their socials for, hopefully, the chance to win one. Thank you very much for listening. As I said at the beginning, it is always appreciated. It's never taken for granted. And as I also said, if you have an idea for the show, get in touch. 3lionspodcast@gmail.com or any of those socials I mentioned. I will be back with you very soon. I have been working on an episode with a fellow England fan about the upcoming squad Thomas Tuchel will announce very soon ahead of those games against Albania and Latvia. We've been throwing some names into the ring and having a discussion about who would suit Herr Tuchel's possible formations. That will be coming your way soon. I hope you can join me for that. So until then, take care of yourselves. Cheers.